Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I want to share with you the information that absolutely opened my eyes to the nutritional benefits of real whole grains and why the health of America has drastically declined once this nearly perfect food was altered by man. Let's go back to the beginning and see what God provided. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, God tells Adam that he has given him two types of food: plants that bear seed for his food and plants that bear fruit yielding the seed. God gave these two particular types of food, perhaps for a reason. First, plants that bear fruit yielding their seed includes our fruits and vegetables. These foods continue to ripen and will eventually spoil and rot over time, losing their nutritional value unless something is done to preserve them. Not so with seeds, which are the second type of plants that God gave for food, plants that bear seeds. And whole grains, such as wheat, are seeds, left whole and intact and properly stored away from moisture, bugs, and rodents. Seeds such as whole grains may be stored fairly indefinitely. There are three basic components of most seeds: the bran, germ, and the endosperm. The bran is the outer layer of the seed that is loaded with vitamins, minerals, proteins, enzymes, and fiber. The germ is usually the most interior part of the seed and is considered the life of the seed, as when planted, it will germinate, forming the sprout of the plant. Like the bran, the germ is loaded with nutrients and fiber, as well as fatty acids, and it is one of the richest food sources of vitamin E. The germ is actually considered the nutrient powerhouse of the seed, as it is the smallest component, but it provides vitamins, minerals, numerous antioxidants, and phytonutrients. The rest of the seed is known as the endosperm, better known to you and I as the white flour portion of a kernel of wheat. The endosperm makes up most of the volume of the seed structure, but is comprised predominantly of protein and starch with very little contribution of vitamins and minerals. If the seeds are left whole and intact, these nutrients are protected within and preserved nearly indefinitely, making them a perfect storable food with virtually no loss of nutrients, a perfect complement to the fruits and vegetables and plants that bear seed that do lose their nutritional value over time. But this is not so once the flour is milled. Milling grains such as wheat into flour now exposes these abundant internal nutrients to oxygen. A process known as oxidation begins to occur shortly after milling. There are many differing opinions and conflicting data from studies as to how much and how quickly nutrient loss occurs, but researchers do agree that most oxidative loss does occur shortly after milling. But one thing that is evident is that flour milled from whole grain wheat with the bran and germ and oils intact is susceptible to spoilage and rancidity. To solve this problem, in the late 1800s, it was discovered that if the bran and germ portions were removed from the white flour portion, a shelf-stable flour could be produced with exceptional, perhaps even favorable baking qualities. By the early 1900s, steel rolling mills were invented that would crush the grain into flour, then send it through sifters to remove the bran and germ, thereby now producing massive volumes of shelf-stable white flour. This invention revolutionized the bread and baking world, as most households now preferred the soft texture of white bread and the baking qualities of white flour. They were more than willing to give up the tedious task of milling their own flour and making their own bread at home. By the early 1900s, the local and home flour mills were replaced by these huge steel rolling mills as white bread and white flour became the food of choice. But what seemed like a wonderful discovery of progress proved to have health ramifications that didn't take very long to become significant concerns. 3 diseases in particular rose to epidemic proportions: beriberi, pellagra, and anemia. Beriberi was virtually unheard of in America until 1907, when rather suddenly more and more cases began to be diagnosed. Beriberi is a thiamine or vitamin B1 deficiency disease that results in various neurological disorders. The first case of pellagra, another of these epidemic diseases, was discovered in Atlanta, Georgia in 1902. Again, virtually unheard of until then. Over 30,000 cases were diagnosed that first year. Pellagra was first thought to be some type of infectious disease, but it was soon discovered to be caused by a niacin or vitamin B3 deficiency. Pellagra particularly affected the southeastern United States and soon became to be known as the disease of the 4 Ds: dermatitis, including severe skin eruptions, dysentery, gastrointestinal disturbances, dementia, and mental illnesses, and finally, death. By 1920, pellagra had reached epidemic proportions, particularly in the South, with a mortality rate as high as 40%. Anemia, an iron deficiency disease causing extreme tiredness and weakness, also began to show up at alarming frequency. Health officials all over the nation worked tirelessly to try and discover the cause of these diseases rising so dramatically in such a short time. And eventually, the cause was traced to the increased consumption of the new white flour, but more specifically, to the lack of these B vitamins and iron in the diet that were once abundantly provided in bread made from freshly milled flour. These nutrients are lost when the bran and germ are removed from commercially processed flour. This loss cannot be overstated. Millers were urged to correct the nutritional deficiencies of their white flour by restoring the missing bran and germ, but they were unwilling to forfeit a lucrative market they had found for what they had come to call byproducts of the milling process. The bran and germ were being sold to the animal feed industry, and in fact, this is still done today throughout much of the world. In 1940, the FDA was forced to set forth standards for enriching the white flour, requiring iron and vitamins B1, B2, and B3 be added to the flour to supposedly replace that which was lost. In 1941, with wartime approaching, this enrichment of flour became mandatory as nutritional deficiencies were observed among military recruits. After the war ended in 1948, the government allowed enrichment of flour to be voluntary, but most states in the U.S. made it mandatory. But for those of us who are nutrition-minded, we can hardly see this as a fair trade. For the more than 30 nutrients lost with the removal of the bran and germ, not to mention the abundant fiber and other phytonutrients, only these 4, iron, vitamins B1, B2, and B3, synthetically produced nutrients were mandated to be replaced. It would take another 50 years of watching the rising incidence of neural tube birth defects before another critical B vitamin, folic acid, also lost with the removal of the bran and germ, would be mandated for enriching white flour. However, discoveries today are now being made that are linking this synthetic folic acid used in the enrichment of flour with a host of other health concerns, so much so that some countries are forbidding the addition of folic acid to flour. It's easy to see once again that no amount of synthetic folic acid can replace the abundant natural source of folate found in real whole grains. So this trade-off has been a costly one. And unfortunately, it didn't stop with just the removal of the bran and germ and this loss of these nutrients. To overcome the yellowing of the flour from the oxidation of the residual oils, they began to use a chlorine derivative compound to bleach the flour. Nitrogen trichloride was used for more than 40 years in this process until it was determined that it caused seizures. Its use was then restricted, but was simply replaced with another chlorine-derived compound, as well as benzoyl peroxide, which has now been proven to destroy B vitamins, as well as vitamin E, and to cause respiratory issues. Another compound used in commercially processed flour in the U.S., though banned in the U.K. since 1990, is potassium bromate. It is used commercially to strengthen the gluten structure in bread dough, but it's known to play a role in liver and thyroid issues. Every time I share this information, I cannot help but recall the warning in Proverbs 14, verse 12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. What looked like a great invention of convenience has become a costly one. The enrichment of commercially processed flour supposedly ended the epidemics of beriberi, pellagra, and anemia. But as we move more and more away from the staff of life and real bread prepared from freshly milled whole grains, and more towards commercially processed foods, particularly bread, we must ask ourselves some important questions. How many people now struggle with neurological disorders, mental health issues, bowel disturbances, and skin eruptions? Have we really corrected these issues? Obesity is now a major health concern. Type 2 diabetes has reached alarming levels, especially in children, and constipation is no longer just an older person's problem. It affects old and young alike. Countless people today, including children, are dependent on antihistamines, allergy medications, antacids, anti-inflammatory, and pain relief medications. These questions and concerns deserve serious consideration. Enrichment of our flour must be seen not as a favor food companies are doing for us consumers, but instead it is a replacement of a mere fraction of the nutrients lost. And no amount of enrichment can ever replace the abundance of nutrients found naturally in real whole grains. Throughout my 35 years of studying bread, coupled with reading God's Word, I am continually amazed at the bread scriptures that I find. But perhaps the most profound is Deuteronomy 24, verse 6, when God gives a law concerning borrowing and lending. It may surprise you that it actually involves bread. In those days when you borrowed something from someone, you were to leave with the lender some type of material possession of yours as a pledge that you would return the borrowed item or money or whatever it was. God says in Deuteronomy 24, verse 6, "Do not take a man's upper millstone as a pledge, for you would be taking his life as a pledge. Wow. That is quite profound. I remember the first day I saw that in the Word. God equates the ability to mill your own grain and to make your own bread with your life. Here's the problem. In the early 1900s, we let someone take our millstones out of our homes, and we have been losing our life and our health ever since. But it's never too late to take it back. I know I've shared this information numerous times before, but it is worth repeating again and again. It certainly opened my eyes to what has been done to our bread and continues to be done to what God intended to be our staff of life. I hope you have been as enlightened as I was when I first learned this information. It has certainly been life-changing for me, and I now hope for you. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.